You have a fascinating article. It's called Oligarch Farmers and the Fires in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, this natural stuff is inescapable, but the way that we intervene in the natural landscapes and sort of decisions that we make as as a society, obviously exacerbate or minimize these natural kind of issues. And so I'd say in California and a lot of places in America and around the world, the way that development occurs is like exacerbates all the natural dangers and all the natural cataclysms that occur without any kind of human hand.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it's funny because there's this billionaire couple. It's one of the most powerful couples or families in the Los Angeles area. Their names are Stuart and Linda Resnick. They're billionaires. They're one of the largest. They own one of the largest farms in America. They are primarily involved in growing pistachios. I mean, if you've seen pistachio commercials or some people like Stephen Colbert hawking pistachios on primetime or like on halftime games, the NFL playoffs. Or if you go to any like grocery store, you'll see pistachios. It's usually their pistachios, and they're the ones who essentially created a market for pistachios and are pushing it on people. So they own these like vast tracts of pistachio orchards and also almond orchards and some orange orchards and stuff like that in the heart of California, in the Central Valley, in this very sort of dry, very flat part of California. I mean, they own so much land. They own hundreds of squares of miles of land. And so you could drive for like an hour at freeway speeds and really not leave their property. Like it's vast. I mean, the scale of it it's horizon to horizon. That's like the size of their farms, and they are, and for whatever reason, they've started really to go viral after these fires in Los Angeles started happening, because I think people, some of the reporting that I did and some of the reporting that other journalists did, kind of the headlines from that reporting started to go viral because people are saying, wait a second, there's this billionaire couple that lives in Beverly Hills. They live in LA and they control more water than Los Angeles, than the entire city of Los Angeles uses in 1 year, and here we have these images of firefighters who are struggling to put out these fires. There are reports that fire hydrants are going empty, that they're like literally water is running out to fight these fires. And so this couple has kind of gone viral in a huge way, I think, in a way that there's never been so much attention on them, because these fires have really focused attention on them. And I found that to be interesting because on a superficial level, they don't really have that much to do with the fires. I mean, they control water in their farms, kind of farming region, which is way up north, north of Los Angeles. And in theory, they could send water to LA to help the city, but LA is not running out of water. It's not like LA doesn't have water to fight these fires. It's just that the pressure in these systems, because there's so many firefighters using this water, it's sort of so low that there's nothing in the tap. And so LA itself has huge stores of water. So it's not really about a lack of water. And so I wrote this piece kind of looking at them because although they don't have a direct connection to the fire, they do have a connection in like a larger sense, because farmers who operate in California, these large farmers who operate in California, they are connected to a system that has a direct connection to the fires. And the system is this aqueduct system that exists in California that runs the length of the state. I mean, thousands of miles of aqueducts of these essentially concrete rivers. And I call it a terraforming system. And terraforming, of course, is usually a term that, science fiction fans will, be familiar with. It's usually described as a sci-fi process of, let's say, if we wanted to live on Mars or something, then Mars would have to be terraformed so that its atmosphere would match the atmosphere of Earth, right? So humans could live somewhere in an alien environment. And I use this word, very consciously to describe the system that exists in California to move all this water around, because it has transformed the ecosystem and almost the atmosphere of California, but not for human thriving, but for the thriving of kind of a natural ecosystem, but for the thriving of a very, very narrow oligarchic class, I guess. And the system, started to be put in place over a century ago, and it's been built out through the decades into the 70s, 1970s. And this system has dammed every major river in California, and it's moved water from where there is water. Usually it's up in the mountains of California and the Sierra Nevadas and other mountains in California, and moving it to places that could be exploited. Sort of low-lying farm land that could be used for farms, right? That doesn't have continuous water supply. That is essentially a desert. So this desert could be made bloom by taking water from somewhere else, right? Destroying ecosystems somewhere else and bringing that water and bringing kind of artificial life to another part of the state. And LA, the development that has been going on in LA, and the development that's going on, in the hills, but also in the valleys, just all over the place, has occurred largely because of the existence of this terraforming system. Because LA doesn't have a lot of its own water, right? LA never had a huge water supply. If LA could only use the water that it can access through the LA River or sort of the underground aquifers that have accumulated over the years, it would be a really tiny town, It would not sustain this megapolis, this just never-ending suburban sprawl of millions and millions of people. It would be small. And so in order to sustain this development and to create this sort of suburban society, to have the mansion in the hills, right? To have Hollywood, to have all the subdivisions, you need to bring water from somewhere else. And water in Los Angeles is brought from, hundreds of miles away, literally hundreds of miles away. And one of the pipelines crosses state lines and takes water from the Colorado River, which is, crosses the state line in Arizona. So it takes water from a totally different state. Other pipelines take water from 500 miles away. Another pipeline takes water from 300 miles away. So LA is like this kind of suburban octopus that has these tentacles sucking water from ecosystems that are far, far, far away from the actual city, and that water sustains life, right? And so that water has allowed the unchecked development of houses and real estate, all across the LA area. And that's the connection that sort of the Resnicks have to the fire, is that they are feeding on the same very system to feed their farms, to feed their orchards, because their orchards are also in a place that has no water of its own. And so they are part of this larger system that moves water around and terraforms the environment in California. And so it's a really fascinating part of the state, and I think it's very different from, we're both in New York, in the New York area right now, and as you know, there's a lot of water here, right? Like Manhattan, because it's such a dense city, has to get its water from also hundreds of miles away from the city itself. But generally, the small towns and cities around New York have their own water supplies. They don't need to go plunder it from hundreds of miles away. But California and Southern California is very different. All the cities essentially have to get water from somewhere else. All the farms have to get water from somewhere else. So it's this artificial, like computer-controlled environment where you have these technicians sitting at these control centers, pushing buttons, sending water, from place to place. It's a very futuristic, but also a dystopian kind of environment. And so that's their connection to this larger political structure that exists here that has allowed these fires to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
We actually have a clip of this film that you're working on called The Pistachio Wars. So let's take a look at that.
In 2015, California was at the peak of its worst drought in history. The news was full of scary stories. Farmers tearing out their crops. They said the state was on the verge of a modern-day Dust Bowl. I was living in LA at the time, So we decided to take a road trip to see this catastrophe for ourselves. This is the heartland of California agriculture. It was supposed to be the epicenter of the drought. But the first thing we noticed when we got out here was that there were new plantings going in everywhere. Massive fields of pistachios and almonds spreading out as far as the eye could see. Farmers are planting thousands of acres of water-hungry new crops, all during the worst drought in history. To find out what was going on, we would have to go back to LA. The people who own these farms live in Beverly Hills. Billionaire Stuart and Linda Resnick are the world's biggest farmers of tree nuts.
They just look terrible, like terrible people, by the way. I can't help but point that out.
Yeah, but you know what, though? One thing, and I will say in their favor, they're actually truly in love. This is like a love story, and a kind of a ruthless love story, you know?
Yeah.
Cutthroat businessmen together, yeah.
Like Marley Matlin and James Carville?
I guess, yeah.
Or do we think that they're not in love? That's not clear. That could be a marriage of political convenience.
But... No, I think this is a true love story.
Okay,
yeah,
true love story.
Yeah, but so you can tell,
like Eva Braun, Adolf.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But I'd say they're equal partners in their venture. Not in
okay, more egalitarian.
A truly equal partnership. Yeah.
So it's a feminist love story. Yeah.
A lib fem, yes, total lib fem
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, lib fem. Yeah.
When anybody like you wants to run my life, I get upset.
Sir, nobody's running your life. If you'd like to work in the oil industry, that's your right. I have a right to be an environmentalist.
Yeah, you can be as stupid as you want, and you have that privilege.
We met farm workers in small towns where the tap water was toxic, or not running at all. Why does no one talk about it?
Why? Because they are afraid.
Money?
Money. Money.
From the state level right down to the smallest local district, water was being privatized.
Exactly.
The pumping here, the illegal pumping that you're saying here,
yes.
Is it directly affecting the wells?
Yes.
So why is that not being talked about?
Because money. American greed. Thank you.
And when we crossed paths with a bunch of farm lobbyists, we discovered something surprising about the pistachio boom.
And Iran could go ahead and start exporting to the United States.
It was all dependent on an embargo of imports from Iran.
We have Arabs that live around here. We have Arabs that take care of that own pistachio orchards. Well, how do you feel? You know, does a Muslim bother you?
The secret to world peace is pistachios.
Dennis Rodman does it because he's nuts. Wonderful pistachios. Get cracking.
Wow. That looks great. And that's coming out this spring, right?
Yeah. It brings back some memories. I haven't seen that trailer in a while. Yeah. Well, you know, it gives you a little glimpse into their world, you know.
Here's a question. What is the connection between the Resnicks and Israel?
Their connection, I think, is personal and business related. So on a personal level, I mean, they're American Jews, you know, so pretty standard, I think, centrist American Jews as far as these goes. And so their views on Israel kind of align with the larger majority of American Jews. They support Israel. They have a private foundation, you know, that from the Family Foundation, through which they fund the IDF and support the IDF in various ways. They have, you know, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars that I could find. So that's just on a sort of a personal level. They have also donated to institutions in Israel, culture institutions. So they're, you know, kind of philanthropists and donors to kind of the military wing of the occupation, but also the sort of the cultural and, you know, kind of the more, you know, kind of non-military or not specifically military parts of Israeli society. So that's one side. And then the other side is a bit more nefarious and I think much more dangerous. And it overlaps with their personal use. It's their business aspect, right? So the pistachio industry was born in America because of the sanctions on Iran. When there was the Iranian Revolution and the Shah was overthrown, Iranian activists essentially took Americans hostage from the American embassy in Tehran. And because of that was the beginning of the first wave of sanctions that was levied on Iran, on the country of Iran. And ever since then, the country has been under some sort of sanctions regime, sometimes less, sometimes more. But in that moment when Iran, which has been traditionally the number one exporter of pistachios to the entire world, the American market was cut off from Iranian pistachios. And at that moment is when kind of the Resnick story, or the Resnick farming story, begins, really, because they saw that there was an opportunity here. A new industry could be created in America because of the protection of these sanctions. And so ever since then, the Resnicks and their wonderful company, that's the name of their agriculture business, the wonderful company, has been, a big proponent of sanctioning Iran, of promoting a very, very aggressive foreign policy position against Iran. They've funded the most extreme neoconservative think tanks that take, the most hardline position possible on Iran, to the point of like starting, doing false flag attacks to start a war. The main one that they are involved with is WINEP. It's the Washington Institute for Near Eastern Studies, and WINEP was created. Actually, it was spun off from AIPAC. It's like an AIPAC spinoff, created specifically because AIPAC has like a bad reputation, and so they created an offshoot to kind of distance itself from the AIPAC name. And WINEP is like the center for the most extreme neoconservative foreign policy. You can imagine, Dick Cheney got his team from it. They're really, among some of the worst think tanks in Washington D.C. And you can imagine, it's a pretty high bar. And so they were involved in that. They're involved in other initiatives, but it's tied to their business, because they want to make sure that Iran is sanctioned, because if Iran's sanctions are lifted, Iran could be a direct competitor with them, right? To their business. And so they're working to keep the sanctions, to expand the sanctions. I mean, I think if America goes to war with Iran, they'd be happy, because anything that cripples Iran permanently would be good for business, and they're always working to convince other countries to levy tariffs on Iranian pistachios. I mean, so they're really trying to box in Iran, and so their business interests, dovetail very, very strongly with the general interests of American empire, right?
Right.
And they're a bit player still. They're not huge. They're not like the oil industry or something like that. But they are a small component of this larger mixture of imperial and business interests, right? That are synergistic. What's good for American empire is good for the Resnicks. What's good for the Resnicks is good for the American empire. And so that's where it comes from. And so, yeah, they're Zionists in their business and in their personal politics, I think is the takeaway message. Yeah.
Can you set up this clip of yourself protesting them?
Yeah, we were in LA, and we kind of wanted to do something, because the Resnicks, even in Los Angeles, aren't very well known, even though they are these massive funders of various cultural institutions, art museums. I mean, they fund the two major art museums in Los Angeles. And so, and yet, their names are on these buildings, and yet people don't know who they are. And so Evgeny and I, we were in LA, and we decided to do the spontaneous series of protests. And so there was the LACMA Gala, which happens every year. It's sort of like the Met Gala, but in Hollywood. So you have all the celebrities going to this museum, doing this sort of philanthropic evening. And so we decided to just protest outside of the gala to try to educate these celebrities that, look, you're going to this museum that's funded by these major climate criminals, because the Resnicks, because they're very much involved in this terraforming system that takes water from ecosystems and brings them to their farms. They're responsible in this really a massive ecocide that's happening in California. I mean, most of the rivers are dead. There's no life in these rivers. The entire ecosystems that these rivers feed have collapsed. You know, there's this mass extinction event that's ongoing in California, primarily because of this terraforming system and the development that it allows. And so we were out there just trying to have fun and trying to get people to, trying to turn people's attentions to these climate criminals in their midst, kind of like, what was done with the Sacklers. So.
Right.
No. You guys need to cross back over. LACMA whitewashes climate criminals. Why is their name on that pavilion?
So we understand you
I don't
guys have
know,
a
go
right
back
to free
this way.
speech, we understand. However, we have the law right here.
We appreciate
We got a permit for this thing.
We appreciate it,
You guys can protest from across the street.
Okay.
We appreciate it. We're just going to keep walking right here.
You can cross back this way.
No, we're just going to keep walking, sorry.
It is not. Like I said, we have.
Show me the permit. Is there a permit? Is there a sign somewhere here?
You need to cross back over.
No, sorry. The LACMA whitewashes climate criminals. There you go.
The Resnicks are worse than the Sacklers. Kick them out of LACMA. The Resnicks are worse than the Sacklers. Get their name off the LACMA wall.
And that is, of course, your co-host, your life co-host, and the Russians podcast co-host.
Yeah, Evgenia. Yeah, giving him hell.
The Resnicks are nature killers. They kill fish and drain rivers.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys were ahead of the curve. Congrats on that.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, we're almost there. We're trying to strategize distribution, and it was we're getting the ball rolling. So it's been many years in the making, this film, but it's finally going to be seen. So I'm very excited about it.